Picture this. Your CEO has a brilliant solution to a problem that's costing the organization thousands of dollars every week. But there's a catch. The board approved a different approach a month ago, and the next board meeting isn't for another 2 months. So what does your CEO do? Wait another month while the problem bleeds resources? Ask for an emergency board meeting? Or just make the change and hope for the best? If this scenario sounds familiar, your board might be stuck in what I call the approval trap, and it could be costing your organization. Today, we're going to explore why the traditional approach to board approvals creates unnecessary bottlenecks, ties your CEO's hands, and ultimately prevents your board from achieving optimal delegation. By the end of this video, you'll understand just where your board falls on the delegation spectrum, and more importantly, the two factors that need to come together for your board to operate in what I call the green zone of delegation. If you checked out my last video, you'll recall that the board stands in for the organization's ownership, and that leads to a number of different implications for how the board should govern. One of those implications is that the board has authority and accountability for everything going on in the organization. Therefore, the board should ensure optimal organizational performance. But we also recognized that the board is a part-time organism governing what is typically a full-time entity. With rare exception, it can only exercise its authority when it meets. How often is that for your board? Once a month, for a few hours, once every 3 months, for a day or two. If your organization has staff, the board is overseeing operations in which staff are working hundreds of hours or thousands of hours, depending on how big the organization is, between board meetings. Another way to think about this is to consider how many operational decisions are being made between board meetings, both large and small. If we look at this from two perspectives, we get something that looks like this. The axis moving up and down on the left-hand side shows that efficiency increases the more we go up on that left-hand side. Well, what do we mean by efficiency? Simply put, how much of the board's precious time is used for making decisions which directly operation. The axis that runs along the bottom shows increasing levels of rigor as we move to the right. What do we mean by rigor? That the board has appropriate control of the organization, that it knows whether its expectations are being met. By appropriate control, we're talking about the board getting its arms around the whole of the organization without getting its fingers in. If we plot a board that is rubber stamping most anything that the CEO brings to it, we find that it is highly efficient and horribly lacking in rigor. What about a board that micromanages? I'm sure you'd agree that it is terribly inefficient, and at first glance you're probably thinking, but it's highly rigorous, so you might place it here. But if you really think about it, a board that micromanages can't see the proverbial forest for the trees. In other words, it's so focused on those things that grab its attention that it neglects more substantive issues. So in reality, the rigor is lacking simply because it's attending mostly to things that are simply grabbing its attention. But you say, wait a minute, Richard, a lot of boards neither rubber stamp nor micromanage. Fair enough. So what are they doing? Many of those boards do what I refer to as a standard board approvals. In such cases, someone, most often the CEO, brings proposals to the board. The board chews on the proposal, perhaps approves the proposal, perhaps modifies and approves it, perhaps sends it back to the CEO to rework it, or just outright tosses it. In my last video, we talked about how the board's reactive approach puts the CEO in the lead rather than the board. But at the same time, it ties the CEO's hands in a strange and needless way. If the board approves a proposed project or program initiative, then the board owns that decision. In other words, only the board can change it. So down the road, as the CEO and her team put the initiative into gear, something isn't working in the way that the board had approved. The CEO should come back to the board and get the board to make a change. Compare that scenario to other employees in the workplace. When they receive a directive from their supervisor, they have multiple opportunities to revisit that directive, either for clarification or perhaps the previously agreed plans aren't working and a change in direction is needed. These days, a supervisor can be on the other side of the world and the employee can usually get an answer within a day. But what if the boss was not available for a month or more? Welcome to the CEO's world. Sure. In between meetings, the CEO can talk to the chair, talk to other board members, or even each of the board members. But still, that's not the board's voice. Until the board convenes in accordance with the law and your bylaws, the board has not spoken. And the whole point of convening is to deliberate, for each board member to hear the perspectives of the other board members as well as the CEO in real time, before casting their vote. You know, the rule of the majority, the rights of the minority, including the opportunity for the minority to present their new insights to change the minds of the majority. So if a CEO needs to get the board's approval for an action prior to the next regular board meeting, what are her options? Well, some boards will give their executive committee authority to make board decisions outside of board meetings as long as the decision is ratified by the board at the next regular board meeting. That's a can of worms all on its own, and it is unnecessary if governance is done well. On the other hand, the CEO might ask the chair to call a special meeting of the board, probably virtually. Not impossible, but still inefficient. Or the CEO might make the change herself, and as the saying goes, beg forgiveness later. Does that sound familiar? On top of that, we can still end up with gaps in what the board has covered in its approvals. Unfortunately, those gaps usually become apparent in between board meetings. So I'm going to suggest that we place these standard board approvals here. They're better than micromanaging, better than rubber stamping. We still haven't reached optimal delegation. Think about what optimal delegation could mean for your organization. A CEO empowered to lead with clarity and confidence. A board focused on strategic oversight rather than operational approvals. And an organization that moves at the speed of opportunity, not the speed of board meetings. That's the green zone, and it's absolutely achievable. If you're ready to explore how your board can get there, we invite you to book a no-obligation discovery call at the Governance Coach. Link is in the description below. And as usual, if you found this video helpful, please like, subscribe, and share it with fellow board members. Together, we can elevate governance across the nonprofit sector.